The question, Libby, when do they get a deal? What will be in it?
Hi, good morning, Alex. Yeah, I think that the question around additional fiscal stimulus has gone from kind of if there was going to be a bill to now how big that bill is going to be, and to your point, kind of when. We expect something to come together relatively quickly and likely going to be bigger than, even we thought. We were sort of expecting that Congress would likely pass something kind of $1 trillion size. But that looks at this point even more like it could be closer to $2 trillion. Congress, as you know, breaks for their traditional August recess on August 7th. So we're now expecting a bill probably to come to fruition by then. There will be headline risk. There will be sort of partisan hand-wringing. But again, we expect this to be really a question of when, not if, and likely going to be quite large in size.
Libby, good morning from London, or good afternoon. Where will the second stimulus package be spent? Will it hit the right places where the economy and the people need it most?
Yeah, frankly, that's a great question. And as you know, this is going to be the fifth bill that Congress has passed. It's being called Phase 4, which is a little bit confusing, but this is the Phase 4 bill that will likely include a pretty familiar mix of policies. We expect there to be an extension of the federal unemployment insurance, which, as you know, expires at the end of July. That will likely be a lower benefit than the current $600 a week, but will likely be included in the bill at some sort of level. We also expect there to be increased state and local funding. If you remember that if all of this, money that Congress has spent, almost $3 trillion so far, state and localities have only gotten $150 billion. So we expect there to be quite a bit more additional support for state and local state and cities. And then also liability protections. This is something that's really important for Majority Leader McConnell, and we expect that to be in the bill as well. But as we said, this quickly wraps us up in terms of the price tag, and again, sort of closer to the $1.5–2 trillion mark than sort of $1 trillion I think the market expected.
So, Libby, we've already seen red lines. President Trump's red line is going to be a payroll tax cut. Mitch McConnell's red line is liability, like you just mentioned. The Democrats is state and local. If we go into the negotiations with all these red lines, you seem optimistic on a deal. I just don't really see how that can happen.
Yeah, well, I am optimistic because I think how that happens is that basically almost everything is included, right? Yes, there have been sort of lines in the sand drawn, but you also see some pretty flexible language coming both from Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader McConnell. I think, interestingly, the payroll tax cut doesn't have a big bid on Capitol Hill on either side of the aisle. Republicans complain it's too expensive. Democrats complain that it only helps people who have jobs, which are not necessarily people who are targeted in this round of stimulus. So I think I'm more skeptical that will be included. But at the end of the day, again, we think all of this, these sort of partisan red lines, as you allude to, will likely soften, and something will come together. And one of the reasons I'm so optimistic, Alex, is both because the economy needs it, and I think members, understand that. They've been home in their home districts over the last 2 weeks. They've heard directly from their constituents. And then, of course, political expediency is going to rule the day. Members of Congress want to get reelected in November, and there is more downside to not passing additional stimulus than certainly upside.
Libby, what would you put in it? So, we talk about the second stimulus checks, unemployment benefits, payroll tax cuts, liability protection, funding for for schools and states. Ideally, What would be your three priorities?
Yeah, I think, if you talk to our U.S. economist, she would say that certainly the unemployment insurance has really helped in terms of bolstering the economy, and so some sort of extension of that. Now, I think we could sort of tinker about the design of that. Does that have a hard stop, kind of hard expiration, or does that sort of get phased out based on where the national unemployment rate is? I think we probably would prefer the latter. State and local funding, I think, is just our muni people would say that state and municipalities are in dire need of additional funding, so that would obviously be a priority. And then, honestly, liability protections, just because, for many businesses to restart safely, they're pointing to that as in addition to schools. Schools have actually also said that's a priority. So I think the things that ultimately will be in the bill, Francine, are probably the things that most market participants would say are also essential.
Libby, I'm also curious as to how you think politicians look at the data that we've seen. We have a really great chart that sort of shows wages and salaries plus government compensation versus the unemployment rate. And sort of if you look at certain underlying things like U.S. retail sales, things are awesome. If you look at how many jobless claims have come down, things look a lot better. But it's better because of the help from the government. And I wonder if how well politicians kind of think about this and understand the dynamics here at play, in that good data needs to still be, we need stimulus though too.
Yeah, I think there is a growing realization of that, Alex. I mean, members, of course, they look at all of the economic data that we see, as well. I think there is also a broad understanding, even though they may not use this language, that fiscal multipliers are higher in a time of an economic downturn. So if you're going to actually spend money and stimulate, you really should do it in an economic downturn, because your bang for your buck is going to be higher, and that's exactly what we've seen in terms of the data. I think that at some point there was this sort of more partisan issue, hand-wringing around this, just because of the fact that blue states were more negatively impacted by COVID in the spring. Of course, we've seen that change dramatically, and that honestly, I think, has just increased the chances that we'll see, additional stimulus because of it. So I think bottom line here is they absolutely are looking at this. I think there is, even if it's reluctant, there is a broad understanding that this policy support has really helped.
Libby, would President Trump be the winner in the next stimulus package because it helps him in the elections in November?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that the White House, again, realizes the importance of additional fiscal stimulus, and of course, there's always going to be sort of some election lens that you're looking through all of this with. Unclear to see, know where we will be in November. I do think, though, there's more downside for President Trump if there is an additional stimulus. I think he realizes that. So is he the winner? Maybe, but would he be the loser if there's no additional stimulus? Absolutely. I think that's much easier to say and more unequivocal.